Number 10. Zachary Taylor never voted in his life, not just for president, but in any political election. He was a military man, thought of himself as independent, kept his political opinions private, and disliked most politicians. This actually made him appealing to the Whig Party, who wanted an inoffensive candidate. Number 9. In most popular portraits, Taylor is dressed in his military uniform. This is somewhat deceptive. While Taylor was a military general, he almost never wore a formal uniform, only donning it for certain occasions out of courtesy and respect. Ulysses S. Grant said Taylor, quote, never made any great show or parade, either of uniform or retinue. In dress, he was possibly too plain. His soldiers were used to seeing him in simple farmer's clothes and a straw hat. Number 8. Taylor was related to 4th President James Madison. They were second cousins, sharing the same great-grandfather. They were actually more closely related than the 2 Roosevelt presidents, Theodore and Franklin, who were 5th cousins. Number 7. Taylor had a complex stance on slavery. He was a planter and owned more than 300 slaves over his life, more than most slave-owning presidents. He didn't oppose slavery as an institution, nor found it immoral. However, he did oppose the expansion of slavery into the newly acquired territories from the Mexican-American War. The South became increasingly hostile towards Taylor, and in turn, he began siding more and more with anti-slavery advocates in the North. Number 6. Taylor had connections to both Ulysses S. Grant and Abraham Lincoln. Grant served under Taylor 15 years prior to the Civil War, during the Mexican-American War. In his memoirs, he spoke highly of Taylor, and according to General George Meade, Grant purposefully modeled his own leadership style off of Taylor. And during the 1848 presidential election, Abraham Lincoln campaigned for Taylor. At the time, Lincoln was a Whig congressman. Number 5. At only 5 feet 8 inches, Taylor was one of the shortest presidents. It might not be obvious when he's only pictured from the waist up, as he had a thick barrel-shaped torso and long, strong arms. However, his legs were incredibly stout. They were so short that he needed help mounting his horse. This is in direct contrast with another prominent general of the Mexican-American War, Winfield Scott, who stood at 6 feet 5 inches and weighed 230 pounds. Number 4. As far as politics, Taylor's feelings on a national bank were mixed. He supported a low tariff, and he believed it crucial that the nation kept its promises to foreign entities. His number 1 goal, however, was the preservation of the Union. This was the driving force behind his political stances, and what turned him increasingly against the South as they threatened secession. His nationalism came from his military experience, as he'd seen so many men die on the nation's behalf. Number 3. Taylor gave the 5th shortest inaugural address. It was only 1,090 words, over 1,000 words less than the average of 2,340. The only addresses that were shorter were those from George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Theodore Roosevelt for their second terms, and Franklin Roosevelt's for his 4th. Perhaps it's no coincidence that the second shortest inaugural address from an incoming president was given by Taylor's admirer, Ulysses S. Grant. Number 2. Officially, Zachary Taylor died from a stomach ailment. However, after Abraham Lincoln's assassination, people began to wonder if Taylor too was assassinated. Conspiracy theorists alleged he was poisoned by Southerners, and the theories remained so pervasive that in 1991, his remains were exhumed and tested for poisoning. Though the test showed no signs of poisoning, the theories persist to this day. Number 1. Prior to 1847, Taylor, in all his 63 years, had no presidential ambitions. Quote, "Such an idea never entered my mind," he wrote in 1846, "nor is it likely to enter the head of any sane person." He only began to consider it when both the Whigs and Democrats took interest in making him their candidate because of his war hero status. He didn't even know he had been nominated by the Whigs, as he hadn't attended the convention. and hadn't even opened the congratulatory letter. He'd only learned he was the Whig candidate a few weeks later. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and donating on Patreon. Donations from $2 to $15 a month help towards more frequent uploads. Patreon link in the description below.